I am increasingly of the opinion that we are going to see political violence on a relatively large scale here in America at some point. I have no reason to believe that tempers and resentment has decreased since the Black Lives Matter riots or January 6th or any of that. And I think the only thing that is preventing political violence is the inflated state of the economy right now, which rapidly looks like it's going to head into a recession. I am not a finance or economics person, but I am involved in that world to some degree, and I pay attention to a lot of people who I believe are trustworthy, and it seems very likely that over the next year or two, we will enter a period of significant economic slowdown. And when that happens, people become depressed, people lose their jobs, and they resort to a retreat to their political, tribal allegiances. So let's start with Nick Fuentes basically solidifying and committing to the furthest possible right position that I think could emerge in this political landscape.
Let's just get the Hitler thing out of the way. Do you actually admire Adolf Hitler?
In some ways, yes. And I'm not a National Socialist, and I'm not I wouldn't identify that way because I'm a Christian. So I'm not any kind of a socialist or a fascist. I like Ye, believe we should have a Christian government. It's a Christian country. God runs the world. We should have a government in accordance with that. But honestly, I don't share this histrionic Jewish view that Hitler is this exceptionally boogeyman, evil figure. The 20th century is full of violence. The 20th century is full of authoritarian ideologies run rampant, and that's a product of modernism and liberalism and all kinds of trends. But this idea that my life is in any way impacted by Hitler, I have a lot more animosity for the ADL. I have a lot more animosity for the ZOA. I have a lot more animosity for the groups that have actually made my life and the life of my family materially worse. I'm sick of being expected by Jewish media and Holocaust museums to beat my chest like you kind of did the other week and say, oh, I hate Hitler. Hitler's a... it's like this weird, it's like 1984, when they put the face on the TV and everybody's got to get all wound up.
Right. So first off, I think it's funny that Nick Fuentes, because he's thrown his lot in with Kanye, he had to commit to this I admire Hitler position simply because that's the optics of it and that's who he's friends with. And I think he overplayed his hand way too much. And the idea that there is even a remotely sizable portion of the population that could be mainstreamed into, well, actually Hitler is somewhat admirable, I think that's ridiculous. And a huge chunk of the potential far right would be in Alex Jones' camp. And Alex Jones, whatever he is, he's certainly not a fan of Hitler. So that's not what I'm worried about. But the cause for concern for me is the fact that he does make a point about the 20th century being littered with genocidal figures, and it seems that only a certain selection of those figures are taboo to talk about, whereas others can be openly celebrated. Like, for example, this guy, who is a professor of economics and statistics at a city college in San Francisco, and here's his perspective on another certain famous dictator.
Let's say Bezos against Stalin.
Yeah. Well, which one improved more people's lives? You gonna ask me this?
100%.
The answer is unquestionably Stalin.
You really believe
unquestionably?
You really believe that?
Oh, absolutely. It's not even close.
Unquestionably Stalin. So Stalin, who was at least as bad as Hitler, and if you're going to dispute that, we have another issue at hand. But it's okay to praise Stalin. In fact, a professor of economics is able to do that, and he's able to come on and have an interview with 600,000 views. His views are completely mainstream. If I go on to Twitter, I can just find people with the hammer and sickle in their bio, right? Hammer and sickle's okay. Evil, redfish, tanky, Marxist, Leninist, Stalinist, savvy. This is a Marxist with a hammer and sickle in her bio. It's like, oh, that's okay, but the swastika is not. And it's like, quite clearly, neither of them are okay, but we only seem to stigmatize one of them. And that's what I could easily see a significant minority of the right who are disenfranchised, dispossessed, and conspiracy-minded, which is increasingly the case nowadays, start to wonder what exactly is the reason why it's okay to support Stalin but not Hitler. And, what are the conclusions of that? And that's the most dangerous point that I think Nick Fuentes is making that I think is correct. If our culture was any more mature and educated, we would stigmatize the hammer and sickle as much as we do the swastika. And this is the most worrying part of this video. The point I'm trying to make is that aside from the groundwork for a far-right movement being established and just waiting on the catalyst of an economic recession and desperate people to take advantage of, there's more going on here. Matt Walsh, who I am not a big fan of, but I do recognize the points that he makes. He calls himself a theocratic fascist. Yeah, theocratic fascist. And this is not a joke. This is an accurate depiction of his own beliefs. He's a hardcore religious conservative. Peter Boghossian, who I generally like, labels Matt as an authoritarian. Walsh is an authoritarian who happens to be on the right, which there's some truth to that. And I want to play you what Matt Walsh says, which is pretty authoritarian. But first, I want to show you what he's reacting to. And this disgusts me and is what I think drives my worry of we're going to have civil conflict because of stuff like this. I think I have to blur out these photos, but this is a drag queen event with 9-year-old children in attendance in which the drag artist is being as sexual as you can imagine it. Like, for example, there's men in kink harnesses and, very clear sexual dancing. And then, here's the best part.
I didn't win anything on my season, so thank you. How are you? What's your name, baby? Major, everyone say hi, Major. Oh my gosh, how old are you, babes? How old are you? You're 9? Oh my god, aw, look at that. Thank you, whoever's mom is out here. Where's your mom?
9 years old. And this is celebrated. Here's Matt Walsh's reaction, and we'll just play it out and take it for what it is.
I'm at a point now, I'm almost like a single issue voter on this. It's not the only issue, but it's the litmus test. It's a perfect litmus test. I don't want to vote for anyone. We get into 2024. I'm not going to vote for you unless you promise me that, like, that sort of scene, that you're going to be sending federal agents into there to arrest every adult in attendance. Every adult in attendance and every adult on stage. I want law enforcement agents running up onto that stage, tackling that piece of garbage, that scum, dragging him off the stage by his feet while he's in handcuffs. That's what I want.
Is that too extreme? It sounds like it, but that man, and many of those men, have their bare asses out in front of 9-year-old children. What's the line? And this is what pisses me off so much. This is the gaslighting of people who are like, well, at a certain point, we're just not going to tolerate this anymore. Is it authoritarian? Yeah, and I don't like Matt Walsh for a variety of reasons, but I'm not interested in writing off everything he says when he makes a valid point, and I think captures the emotions a lot of people have. I don't have children, but if I had kids and I was not ideologically predisposed towards this weird obsession with having children come in contact with drag queens, I'd understand the anger and fear and disgust. And here is yet another cause for concern. Listen to the next thing Matt Walsh says.
What you need to understand here is that we are dealing with pure evil. This is pure evil. The people who are doing this are evil. The people that are attending it and the people who support it. I know people you don't want to think this way about your fellow Americans, especially if you go online and you see the number of just seemingly normal Americans who will defend this. And you think, I can't believe that there are so many evil people in this country. There are. So with this is not compromise, okay? All we can do with this is crush it, destroy it. That's what you do with evil. And that's what we have to do with this.
I understand the impulse to call people who sexualize themselves around children evil, and obviously there's some truth to that. But the problem that Matt Walsh is making, and that I think the far right is making, is not understanding that the capacity for evil lies within everybody. To say that those people there are uniquely evil is exactly the same incorrect point that the Nazis made, the communists made, that everyone makes about another human being. Oh, well, they're not actually regular human being. There's something metaphysically wrong with them. And if these people are evil in a fundamental sense, well, that justifies doing anything to them. This is why I cannot wait until Jordan Peterson and the Daily Wire end up having an internal spat, because this view of the world that some people are uniquely evil and others aren't is simply wrong. And it's certainly the opposite of what any competent psychologist and historian would tell you, because it's exactly that attitude that leads to the worst atrocities. And the problem is, it's so easy to understand why Matt Walsh can make that point, because the most archetypically evil thing is adults sexualizing themselves around children. And that's what we have here. So what do we do about it? This is my point. If you are someone who supports gay people and supports transgender people and is not willing to cede power to religious conservatives, then you need to speak up. It is on the regular ass people in the center to call out honest degeneracy, which is what that drag show represents and is. Because if we don't, then the far right are the only ones loudly stating that true point. And then they also get to import their worldview in of some people are uniquely evil. This isn't just a failure of culture. This isn't just a failure of so many things. It's a fundamental evil that needs to be destroyed. And that is what leads to the the worst atrocities. And we are getting very close to this shit. And I can sit in my bubble all day and go, oh, well, this isn't going to happen. And, I've lived an extremely privileged life. And, I've never seen political violence affect me in my life. So, why should I worry about it? It's like, no, it's not that simple. People need to speak up. And I understand I am beating a dead horse with a lot of this stuff, but I feel that's what I have to do because we are rapidly approaching things deteriorating in a bad way. So I wish everyone good luck and Godspeed.